It was August 1990. The monsoon had turned relentless, and the mighty Godavari River was swelling behind control. Memories of the devastating 1986 floods were still fresh, but few imagined that history was about to repeat itself. At that time, I was working with the National Institute of Amateur Radio, Hyderabad. A request came from the state administration: urgent deployment of amateur radio operators was needed to restore communication in flood hit areas. Without delay, I set out toward the affected region accompanied by my wife. We reached Bhadrachalam, where we reported to the sub-collector Sudhendra Bhattacharya IAS. After a brief interaction, he directed us to proceed to Rudramakota, a remote village deep in the flood zone. He personally drove us up to Dummugudem, from where our journey continued by a launch. The river was unrecognizable, vast, restless, and spreading far behind its banks. Normally, launch movement would be restricted during such floods, but this was no ordinary situation. We had to reach the interior areas. Balancing equipment on the unsteady launch, I set up a ham radio station using the boat's battery. It was our only link to the outside world. Telephone lines had already disappeared beneath the rising waters. Rudramakota was cut off even in normal times. Communication there was minimal. Now surrounded by floodwaters, it felt like an island lashed to the world. I began monitoring flood levels through official frequencies. Every hour, updates came in numbers, rising steadily. My attention was fixed on Peruru, an upstream point. In 1986, it had recorded a dangerous level of 18.06 meters. This time, the readings were climbing again: 12 meters, 14 meters, 16 meters. Then came to the moment that changed everything. It touched 18 meters. A quiet fear settled in. I tried to warn the officials at the camp. This place will not hold. We must move people to higher ground. But my words did not carry weight. For many, the river still looked calm on the surface. Nothing will happen, they said. We have seen floods before. Even villagers reassured me. Some believed I was worrying unnecessarily. A few even felt my warnings were causing panic. But the data told a different story. That evening, I climbed to the terrace of a large house nearby and looked out. The river had already spread in all directions. The boundaries between land and water were fading. Backwaters were silently advancing. I made one last effort, urging officials to alert the villagers, to beat drums to warn people to move them to nearby hills. But hesitation remained. Left with no choice, I dismantled my antenna from the guest house. If the waters rose as predicted, that place would not survive the night. Then something past midnight. Shouts pierced the darkness. I woke up instantly. Stepping outside with a torch in hand, I saw what I had feared. The water had arrived. It was no longer a distant threat. It was rushing through the village, entering homes, following paths, rising relentlessly. I rushed toward the guest house. By the time I reached, water was already surrounding it. People who had dismissed the warnings were now in panic, carrying belongings, calling out to each other, trying to save whatever they could. Some voices in the darkness said, "The radio man was right." There was no time for discussion anymore. Despite damaged equipment, I managed to reconnect my radio temporarily. The message from upstream confirmed my fears. The water was still rising and more surge was on the way. Evacuation was no longer an option. It was necessity. Soon arrangements were made through radio communication. A special launch was sent to evacuate us. Reaching it was itself a struggle. Water had risen so much that we had to climb down walls to step into the boat. As we moved through the flooded expanse, the scene was unforgettable. Massive tree logs, washed away from distant forests, were racing along the current. One collision could have ended everything. From above, helicopters hovered, dropping food packets to stranded people on hilltops. Eventually, we reached Konavaram, safe but surrounded by a sea of water. People stood crowded with their cattle and whatever little land remained above the flood. There, for the first time in days, there was a moment to pause. Food arrived by air, shelter was arranged, communication was restored, and slowly the river began to retreat. Even today, that night remains vivid in my memory. The silence before the flood, the disbelief, the sudden chaos, and the realization of how quickly nature can change everything. Above all, it was a reminder of how a simple radio signal sent at the right time can connect lives when all other systems fail. Thank you, 73. Bye.